instilled in Mike the idea of owls as an archetype and a message and a transformation. And I always think that, there's a reason why I'm into this paranormal stuff myself. There's got to be something good, I think, out of it. Maybe that is Mike's role here, to bring this message to the public, because Lord knows we all need to open our eyes to this whole event and subject.
Well, hey, Michael, I was going to ask you, you're really into UFOs big time. I mean, have you ever seen a UFO?
Yes, I have. Of course, everybody that I talk to typically will see lights in the sky, things that are moving that like they shouldn't move, not like airplanes or anything like that. But I actually saw an object hovering over my house on January 10th of 2012. I'm coming home from my son's middle school parent meeting, and I see something that looks like a full moon. I take 2 pictures with my iPhone of the full moon because it's so beautiful and clear that night. When I looked at the pictures later, there was an object hovering within the glow of the full moon that, when I lightened it up, looked like a very unique triangle with a bright red light in the center of it. It's a long story. I don't want to have to take up your time, because you're doing a wonderful job with this interview of Mike here.
Well, that's just it. I mean, people have had encounters, and then all of a sudden, it seems like after they, had an encounter, that's when the paranormal and all this stuff, seems to be kicking in.
Matter of fact, I would like to ask Mike, does he have a problem when he goes by streetlights? Do they go off?
I have had that's happened to me a few times, yes. And what has happened is it's always at a moment where I'm thinking or I'm saying something aloud to myself. Like I'm saying, is this UFO stuff real? Boom, the streetlight goes out. Yes, so I have had streetlights. And I've documented those before.
I'm just wondering, Michael, if Mike was ever implanted. I'm just, have you been, have any of your medical exams, have you had any MIRs or body scans or anything ever done for other medical?
I did have at a UFO conference, there's a fellow who his name is Steve Coburn, and he will do a series of tests with a Geiger counter and a black light and FM receiver and stuff like that. And what he gets the best results is a Stanley stud finder. It's a little bit of the high-end Stanley stud finder, not the $19 one. It's near $100. This one, and I did it 2 years in a row at the same UFO conference. He had no memory of the first time, and I certainly did. And he basically picked out the same things, so little dots, little points where the the stud finder would find an anomalous little signal behind each of my ears, right in the center of my forehead, and in the webbing of my left hand between my ring finger and my middle finger, the little webbing of skin. There is nothing at all to feel in there. And then on my foot, on my left foot.
Wow. Do you have it on your left foot? Now, is that, I've heard people, say that they have basically like a little hole that never quite goes away, or like maybe they had a major spider bite or something when they were young, and it just, kind of heals over, but it doesn't heal over. Where about is it in your foot, out of curiosity?
It was tough. It's just on the surface of my foot. I do have 3 little dots on my left wrist, and now I'm 55 years old. They're pretty hard to see now. You can see them if you bright sunlight and a little magnifying glass, but they look like 3 little tiny scoop marks, or like like it looks like track marks, like from like needle marks. But I had them when I was about 10 years old. So that's 45 years ago. They were clear. And I remember literally like walking to school as a 10-year-old in the springtime or something and looking at my wrist and thinking like, that triangle is perfect. Like the perfect equalateral triangle. And it's all of about less than a half inch between.
I was just going to ask you that. If you connected the dots, if it would form a triangle.
Perfect equilateral triangle, yeah.
What do you think about that, Michael?
It's pretty faded now, but it's still there.
Well, I was at a meeting last night where we had one of our members show us a perfect equilateral triangle on his lower back, scoop marks as well. These were scoop marks, but believe it or not, these were as big in diameter as, for instance, a cigarette. If you took a cigarette and burned somebody, on the skin, it might be the same size, although these were much deeper. The whole idea of the equilateral triangle, that has got to be some kind of mechanism, I believe, that is typically used during alien abductions. God knows what it's for and what it does, but it would be interesting to get Mike's area that he has that on tested with the Geiger counter or the black light even, the
and it has
UV
been.
light.
No, he said it has. He said it has been, Michael.
Oh, yeah, and was there a reaction on that triangle at all to the meters?
Nothing at all. And what also way to look at it is I have been told. I've thought about this too, and someone else has brought it up. Perhaps it's there's the little triangle dot on my arm is there for no other reason than to get my attention and to make me think, and to sort of like a little calling card, right? So that was a little calling card, nothing else.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great theory.
I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's just another way of thinking about it, yeah.
Now, hey, Michael, before you get out of here, one real question I got to ask you. With your group of, people that are into the UFOs, how many of them, because some of them are into Bigfoot, has any of them ever had an encounter with a UFO and then immediately heard a Bigfoot or saw a Bigfoot or any signs of a Bigfoot in the area?
I don't know that any one of us in the UFO I-team, there's 10 members right now, have ever seen those kinds of archetype situations together or close together. But I know we have one gentleman, he's Lee Strauss, he's our technical camera guy, and he's our intrepid guide. He'll go up to 15,000 feet with Skywatch equipment, that kind of guy. And he has an abduction story that he tells that happened a few years ago where he believes he was woken up by aliens. But, and it has no connection with what I'm just going to tell you, but this is fascinating that he's got both of these stories. He was in the North Cascades, high up in the mountains, doing his outdoor thing like he always does with his camera and his gear. And he's walking down an old abandoned forestry road, and he's miles, probably 10 miles from civilization at this point. And he's just having a great time camping on his own. And matter of fact, he's the kind of guy that has a sleeping bag in the shape of his own body, so he can walk around in a sleeping bag, and when he gets tired, he just lays up against a rock, and he's fine for the night. That's the kind of prepper this guy is. But he's walking down this path, and all of a sudden, he says, out of the blue comes a basketball-size boulder, a rock, flies across the path, and literally takes out about 3 of the 12-inch diameter trees that are on the side of the path on the left-hand side. And he's looking at the right-hand side, trying to figure out, was this a rock fall? Did it come down from the mountain somewhere? And he says there's just no way that was any kind of a hill or a mountain on the right-hand side of the path. So he kind of like just kind of sucks it up and just keeps walking down the path, thinking it was a one-off situation. And literally down the path, maybe 100 yards, another boulder, a large one, comes across the path and knocks out a few trees again. He decides that he was going to go any further. He backs up and gives the intention in his mind, for some reason he thought he needed to do this, that I'm leaving now, you don't have to worry. He didn't have any other contact or any other frightening situations after that. But this is a guy who had an abduction story prior to this potentially Sasquatch story that he tells us.
Well, that I don't know. I really think a lot of this stuff all ties into each other. That's the whole thing. Like, I am so intrigued with Michael, with his owls and, what's going on with him. But, what really made me really realize something was going on when he mentioned the grays out coming towards his bedroom window. That it's just so coincidental. All of a sudden, that happens, and then all of a sudden the owls, it's just, maybe the owls are there just keep, like I said earlier, keep an eye on him, keep track on him and watch him, or maybe to comfort him for he doesn't remember what happened.
Yes, there you go. To have a residual memory that is not terrifying potentially, that it could be just an owl, that his subconscious could deal with that. Gosh, I got to get out of here and not take up you guys' time, but I would like to ask Mike one last question.
Go ahead.
How is it, Mike, to work with the famous historian Richard Dolan?
It's great to work with. He's been very supportive, so it's very interesting because he's, on the surface, he's very much a materialist and he's a historian and he looks at dusty old documents and stuff like that. At the same time, over the years, he's become very aware of this stranger side of the UFO contact thing. Yeah, he's been great. So he's been very supportive. He wrote the foreword to the first book, and has been a real promoter of mine. I'm wonderfully indebted to him, trusting me on my first book like that.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's wonderful. I thank you for that confirmation. I've only met Richard once, but he was very very friendly and very outgoing, and I really appreciate all the work that he does with his publishing company. And I appreciate your book. Thank you, Mike, for this whole idea of archetypes and synchronicities. Everything is kind of interesting, and the whole idea that it ties in potentially to UFOs. Yeah, thank you again. I'll let you go, Gary. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for calling, Michael. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You have a good evening, sir.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say Michael is like the celebrity around the Seattle area on UFOs. And, we call him the paranormal lawyer. He's the attorney, and he's really into UFOs. So I find him very intriguing. Now let's get back to, a few more stories you can tell us.
Okay, a few more stories. So I was just telling one about the Susan Kornacki. She's a known experiencer, so she's out there talking about her experiences. She's totally at peace with her own stuff. She was at an Easter party. The reason I talked to her, she said, I have an owl story for you. And I bet you it took 2 years before we finally connected. We had a long conversation on Skype, and so she was at an Easter party. Her husband at the time and her daughter were at the Easter party, and it was a family gathering. And then she all of a sudden had this kind of sensation run up and down her spine. Like, it was really distressing, freaked her out. And she said, I got to go. I can't deal with this. I got to get out of here. And so she's talking about this, like this surge of energy running up and down her spine. And so she goes home and she's freaked out, and it's this lovely spring day. So she lies down in her hammock in her backyard. As soon as she lies down in her hammock, an owl lands on